All right, guys, you've made it this far. This is the area before we get to the action steps on the next lesson. What I wanted to do in this lesson, guys, is really share with you some personal stuff that I think would you might or might not benefit from. But look, the reality is, for me to become successful when I did, I needed to have my back against the wall. So I'm going to tell you something about my background that you may or may not have heard of, but it's something that I hope inspires you or encourages you. So back in 2014, at the beginning of 2014, this is well after I sold my restaurants. I got a divorce. Things were really not looking great, but I still had some money. Unfortunately, I had some bad investments, and I was living off my savings to the point where finally I ran out of money. And before I knew it, I had received an eviction notice from my landlord that I fought off as long as I could and begged them and pleaded with them until finally they said, no, enough is enough. Here's your court date. Here's your eviction notice. You show up in courts in 2 weeks. In addition to that, guys, I had to forfeit my Mercedes because they were going to repossess it. It wasn't a matter of if, it was when. And I decided, like, I'm not going to have you guys repossess my car while I go into the grocery store to pick up some food while my daughter's with me. So to avoid that, I literally just called the bank up and said, come take the Mercedes. I don't want it anymore. And so they did. They came and they picked it up. For a period of time, I was walking around Austin without really much. I wasn't homeless, obviously, because I still had a roof over my head. I could have moved back in with my family, but I chose not to. I could have asked for help, but I decided not to. I decided to absorb this. I decided to let this make me stronger. And what happened, guys, when I hit rock bottom, it's mind-blowing for me. I found out everything was still exactly the same. Nothing in my life really changed when I went broke. My credit was ruined. I couldn't go buy something on credit. I had no money. I was literally scrapping change, doing side jobs. And I remember the most embarrassing part was when I went and asked one of my good friends $100. I went to ask him for $100. And then finally picked up some work here and there. It really was mind-boggling for me. Not that I got to this position, because it was embarrassing to be in this position, but that it wasn't really as scary as I thought it would be. Having my car repossessed, getting a foreclosure notice stamped on my door, right, for all the neighbors to see. It was extremely embarrassing for me. I was so ashamed. But I really thought it would be worse than that. And what I found out when I was in my worst position of my life, I didn't even have enough money to go take my daughters to Chick-fil-A or McDonald's, and it was hurtful. What I found out is that my biggest fear wasn't going broke. My biggest fear wasn't that I wouldn't be able to eat, because I'm an intelligent human being, as I'm sure you are. We're all capable of making money enough to eat, enough to survive. But what I found out my biggest fear was having people know that I was a failure. That was my biggest fear. And when I overcame that fear by going through this, it really, it made me not afraid anymore. Now there was nothing really I was afraid of. I was no longer truly afraid of failure. Real failure. I'm not talking about failure, oh, my business didn't work. I'm talking about failure like I'm not even gonna have a roof over my head failure. So ultimately, guys, I had faced my greatest fear. My greatest fear I had faced with my back against the wall. Nothing left, nothing in my pocket, no money in my savings, and no car, almost no house. Not even be able to provide. And guys, you know, some of you know my story. I was at the time recently divorced. I had child support. I was behind on my child support payments. I couldn't even give my ex-spouse the financial means to support our daughter for a period of time. But once I realized there was nothing else to be afraid of, I was still alive. I still had my health. I still had the same knowledge that I had before I went broke. I was more determined than ever to succeed, because there was nowhere else to go but up. There was nowhere else to go. So that's when I discovered dropshipping, because I needed a very low-cost alternative to make a lot of money. And there was no better way to do it. And so I launched my first store 2014, and literally within 8 months, guys, yes, I had some ups and downs. I failed here and there with different concepts, but that's why you're here joining me in this journey, because I figured out what doesn't work and I really honed in on what does, and high ticket dropshipping works. So that's why you're in this journey, watching these videos with me, learning from me, applying, and hopefully launching your business. And after 8 months, I built up the store. I sold it. You guys probably know this part. I sold it for a very nice, sizable amount relative to where I was. So in 8 months, literally 8 months from the time I got the eviction notice, not having food on my table, not being able to take my daughter to Chick-fil-A, not being able to pay child support, from that very moment, the very brink of my biggest failure, right? At the lowest of my lowest, my credit had collapsed. I was thinking about filing for bankruptcy. My parents had already found out what was going on in my life. My friends already knew. They repossessed my car, or the banks did. I was at the lowest point. I was literally going through my sofas for loose change so I can go buy something to eat, because I refused to go ask for help. From that point, in 2 weeks from my dropship store, I made enough money to pay my rent and my back rent. And then little by little, I built myself up, sold my store in 8 months, went to work for the mentor that I learned from, started making really good money, started coaching other people, and here I am today, sharing this success story with you. So this all happened in the past 2.5 years, guys. 2.5 years from when you watching this video today. 2.5 years ago to this very point, I went from dead broke, eviction letter, repossessed car, couldn't afford to put food on my table, couldn't afford to pay child support for my daughter, to having the success that I have today. And I share this with you guys, not so you can feel sorry for me, but so you can be encouraged, inspired, hopefully, maybe, I don't know. But without a doubt, guys, no matter what your situation is, anywhere in the world you are, because I know some of you are watching this from Australia, some of you are watching this from South Africa, some of you are watching this from your parents' basement in Germany, some of you are watching this in San Diego or California, New York, wherever you are in the world, guys, Canada, South America, and you might be in a really bad position right now, and you barely put enough money to buy this program, and barely have a little bit more to drive some ads. I want you to know I was way worse than where you are now, or at least in the same shoes. And for those of you who don't have your back against the wall, I need you to create that sense of urgency, because that is part of, I think, the reason why people like me succeed. Because when we face our ultimate fear and overcome it, then we become successful by default. So I hope you enjoy this, guys. I wanted to give you this before you moved on to the real lessons. You do have one more step where I have some action plans, some goal setting goals for you, some things I need you to kind of cross out and complete before you get started on finding your niche, which is the very next lesson. Before you go through this amazing journey with me, guys, that I'm so excited to be on with you, I need you to complete the next lesson. There'll be some homework, there'll be goal setting worksheets, there'll be some calendar stuff I need you to complete, and you got to get all this done, okay? So I'll see you in the next lesson.